A lot of people think that the most important thing a musician or any artist can do is be authentic. Let's call this the myth of self-expression. And this myth is the idea that once a musician or any artist has, maybe learned the basics of how to express themselves, then everything that follows that should be no more than a matter of authentic or honest expression. A great musician, on this view, will make their music and then they sort of let the chips fall wherever they may. They put their art into the world and people love it or they hate it or anywhere in between. The point is that whether the art actually lands with people out there in the real world is supposed to be unimportant to the true artist. The best just don't care too much about what other people think. The point was the expression itself. The absolute top tier artists and musicians supposedly are those who express themselves the best and the most honestly. And the worst artists are those who just didn't learn how to do that specifically well enough. This is a popular, though often unspoken myth amongst fans of all genres, from prog and metal to jazz and classical and blues and hip hop and pop and grunge. Almost everyone loves this myth, but it is a myth. It's just nonsense, and it's actually quite harmful too. Of course, there's nothing wrong with an artist, a musician, or anyone expressing themselves. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with that, but it is not the highest aim in art. It's certainly not the only aim. More important still, it's not immoral, it's not less noble or impure for a musician to care about people liking their art. I'm here to tell you that it is not a moral obligation to be true to yourself or authentic or whatever the hell we might want to call it, whatever any of that might mean. To put self-expression and that closely related concept of authenticity at the peak of artistic purpose and achievement is, maybe this is where I lose you all, if I haven't lost you all already. Honestly, that point of view can be a bit childish and it can even be a little bit narcissistic. So let's stop worrying so much about self-expression and worry a little bit more about communication. Art is about communication. It's about communicating something to someone else. Expression, honestly, is easy. People are always expressing themselves. That's not a problem. Communication is hard, and that's part of why it's so much more valuable. Now, if there's any artist out there in the popular imagination that is really about being true to themselves, about authenticity and self-expression, Kurt Cobain is that guy, right? He himself talked about the importance of this explicitly on a number of occasions. He says things like, in expression, you need 100% full freedom, and our freedom to express art is being seriously fucked with. I also like this one. I just can't believe anyone would start a band just to make the scene and be cool and have chicks. I just can't believe it. I mean, I don't know, Kurt, have you heard of a little band called The Beatles? Or pretty much every rock band that formed in the Anglosphere in the 60s and 70s? These guys were obsessed with getting laid. Kurt today has become a bit of a poster child for the kind of expression above all else position in rock music, so much so that people will just make up quotations and attribute them to him where he's saying something to this effect, right? So one that has been attributed to him was, wanting to be someone else is a waste of who you are. Not too cringe, fair enough, but he didn't say it. Another one that I do actually kind of agree with, I think this is a good attitude, is that I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I am not. I think that's actually a very healthy attitude. But one which is just downright cringe, and he did not say, is they laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at them because they are all the same. This is a little bit Joker. We live in a society, right? It's awful. It's cringe. But luckily, he never said that. Nonetheless, it's still kind of all bullshit, to be honest. Yes, he did value self-expression very highly. Nothing wrong with that. But there's so much more going on with his songwriting and his music and his performance than just pure self-expression. Like, this was a dude obsessed with the craft and form of Beatles songs. He may not have been a woodshedding kind of guitar player, but there's definitely craft in his playing. There's very effective communication in all of the music he wrote. And as gritty and as messy as Nirvana's whole aesthetic was, they're still operating in a very accessible mode. Like, their music is radio friendly. It's verse, chorus type stuff with big catchy choruses and all that. The accessible forms that literally every Nirvana song fits within have possibly the best proven track record in the history of art for communicating emotions to millions of people, right? It's built into the form and into all of the music he did. expression alone does not explain Nirvana's massive artistic and commercial success. It just does not. And this leads me on to my next point, and that is that the elevation of expression above all else is a massive disservice to musicians and artists. Whoever it is that your favorite musician or artist is, it could be anyone from like Elliott Smith to Nick Drake or the Beatles or, I don't know, Beethoven. These people are not idiot savants. Most of them aren't, some of them are. There is real skill and craft, not just to like the musicianship of it, but also those softer skills. It's not just technique and skill and musicianship. It's choice, it's taste, it's saying, I want to do this and not that because this communicates my idea or my feelings better. If you think that your favorite artist truly did just express themselves with nothing else to it, you are massively underrating them. Massively. Kurt Cobain didn't stick to those comparatively limited forms simply for the sake of self-expression. That pop song form communicates very, very well in the hands of a capable artist, okay? And now, a little question for you. How much do you worry about being authentic and about expressing yourselves when you're just using language, when you're talking to people, right? When you're having a chat? You probably do a little bit. Most people do. Most people do want to be authentic. You're usually looking to express your thoughts in an honest way. But at the same time, it's also done with the understanding that you're communicating effectively. Maybe you're trying to convince someone or inform someone. We do these things all the time. You're trying to entertain them, make them laugh, okay? If someone doesn't speak your language that well, do you simplify your vocabulary? Do you avoid certain words? Do you code switch? Do you talk differently to your grandma than you do to your boss? Do you talk differently to your mates down at the pub? I'm going to assume that you do. Now, which version of that is the authentic you? In what context are you purely expressing yourselves? It's really hard to pin down, right? And that's fine, and that's complicated and not really the topic of this. But the point is that it's not just all about expressing yourself in some purely authentic way when it comes to verbal speech. The truly authentic person, interested only in self-expression, wouldn't code switch. Probably wouldn't even bother with learning a language because you don't need a language to express yourself. Language is not just for you. It's for other people. It's a social thing, okay? Everyone code switches. You do it. I do it. Why would music be any different? It's the same thing. Communication is super important, right? Now, personally, honestly, I never really worry about self-expression or being authentic in my speech because as far as I'm concerned, everything I do is authentic or expressing myself. It's not a concern I have at all. Expressing myself just happens. Honestly, it happens to you as well. And it's the same with musicians. Right? You don't have to prioritize self-expression because even if it's about something that isn't really a truly felt feeling, or even if you're just BSing with your friends and just talking crap, that can be sufficiently authentic that you're being true to yourself. You just don't need to think about it really. So when I write some music or I'm playing with someone, I don't worry about whether I'm playing an authentic bass line or taking a truly self-expressive guitar solo, right? I don't worry about that stuff at all. Every time I play, I am, by definition, expressing myself. And it's the same, again, for everyone else. As an artist, expressing yourself should be able to easily go hand in hand with other drives or ambitions or end goals. You know, even when it comes to trying to appeal to people, that's not just pandering. If you're editing yourself, toning down the self-expression a bit, well, I'm sorry, but that is just what adults do. We understand that that's fine, okay? That doesn't mean you're no longer expressing yourself at all. It's not a binary on-off switch. Now, I have a 2-year-old daughter and she's learning language all the time, right? Some people say that as babies and toddlers develop and they learn language, they're learning to express themselves. That's not really true, though. I fully well know that babies can express themselves perfectly fine quite quickly, right? They're crying and whinging all the time. That's them expressing something. But what they're not doing is communicating, right? So babies are expressing themselves immediately, but communication is hard. It takes them ages to learn how to communicate, and it takes ages for you to learn how to communicate with them. Don't get me wrong, I understand that there is a bit of both. It's all wrapped up in this simultaneous, development of cognition and expression and communication. But the point is that communication in both language and art is way more important than the simple express yourself bit, okay? And now for what I think is the biggest problem with this myth of self-expression. It's what I would think of as a kind of moral confusion. And it really is the moralizing thing that gets to me. Even now, I think that some of you will be watching this and you might be a little bit annoyed or offended by what I'm saying. Some will think that what I'm saying isn't just incorrect or wrong or stupid, which is fine, but actually like a little bit immoral. I've had this reaction to other videos before. It goes against people's deeply held values so much that to say, don't worry about self-expression, worry about other things, feels unethical, okay? And I'm going to be honest, I once felt a bit like that as well. I once thought that art was just some pure sort of passion or self-expression. I thought that that's what I saw in my favorite artists, whether that's, Brian Wilson, who has a huge myth of pure self-expression around him, and it's nonsense, trust me, or bands like Yes or Stevie Wonder. These people know how to communicate, know how to orient their art commercially and socially. They're not just expressing themselves. Honestly, anyone who has studied any art seriously, and for me it was actually literature at university, quickly learns that all of the greatest art goes way beyond mere self-expression. All of it. And this is true for all of us and all of our tastes. Unless you are exclusively into loads of super outsider art and nothing else, and even then it's a bit debatable. People like Syd Barrett, who's quite outsider, Brian Wilson in his later days can be, Elliott Smith has a huge myth of self-expression around him. We can go back in time to all the classical blokes, Bach and Mozart and Beethoven, Stravinsky, whoever you want, right? These guys are not just expressing themselves. You will not be able to find a single Bach piece which is just him expressing himself for the sake of it. It just did not happen. I'm sure he did do that when he was playing, but that's not what we have today. That's not what his reputation and his greatness rests upon at all. It exists in a communicative context. To wrap things up a bit, I think people are going to be way better off thinking of authenticity as just the relationship between an artist and their art, and it has very little actually to do with you. There definitely are artists out there who are more or less authentic, who are more or less inclined to just purely express themselves. And some of those artists, for example, I think Joni Mitchell is one of them, are some of my favorites, but there's so much more going on. If I found out tomorrow that Joni Mitchell was faking it all and she was lying and it was all a persona, it wouldn't actually detract from my enjoyment of the music at all, because she's a brilliant communicator. She has a very high level of craft, brilliant lyrics, blah, 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 blah. She's great. It doesn't just rest on self-expression, okay? So maybe on the extreme end of things, being a total sellout who panders to every changing style is, well, it's certainly unauthentic, right? And that can be problematic. So I'm not saying don't be authentic at all. The problem is, on the other end of the spectrum, there are loads of purely authentic, self-expressive artists out there who just completely suck, okay? There is such a thing as craft. It does matter. It helps us communicate. And I will also say that for the vast majority of people, I do think being authentic is much easier. And that's probably a more important part. It's easier to say something that you genuinely think most of the time. But that doesn't mean there's any sort of moral obligation or make it better to do that. Because, well, we know that actors are not really being authentic in any way, right? And musicians are acting a little bit as well. Musical artists are putting an act on. David Bowie, classic example, right? There's a persona there, okay? And it still works perfectly. Self-expression, and this is what I really want to land on, is actually really easy. Vast majority of the time, it's not what you're reacting to. It's not what you love about your favorite artists. You might like the fact that being authentic, but there's a lot of craft, there's a lot of communication going on that goes well beyond it, because it's so much harder to communicate something via craft than just pure self-expression. And I'm saying all of this, we'll wrap it up now. I'm saying all of this as someone who's very far, you could ask any of my friends, very, very far towards the kind of being blunt and saying whatever I think, whether it will be taken or received well or not. That's personally not something I take much into consideration. Don't just express yourself. It's not always a good idea. You might think there's a sort of moral obligation to do so, or that makes you more pure, more real. This feels to me like a very specifically kind of late 20th century Anglosphere sort of attitude that has not been very popular at all throughout history. So, to wrap it up, authenticity, self-expression, I think it should just happen. It does just happen. We don't need to worry about that. We don't need to elevate it into the most important thing in music or rock music, which I think people tend to fall into that trap a little bit more with that kind of music. It can be good, it can be terrible. Communication is way harder. Self-expression is easy. Let's think more about communication. How are people communicating their ideas and their feelings? Who cares about self-expression? Anyway, that's us. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you around.